Cavan Gale, who gave me a report. I'm feeling much better, and hopefully we'll see him early in the new year. I am to report that Senator Sinclair broke his leg, and not contrary to the rumor that it was leaping from an open window. Contrary to those rumors, it was actually a slip that he took on a narrow pathway and broke his ankle. So I've been advised by Senator Dr. Floyd Morris to tell him to apply for temporary, what's the phrase? Temporary disablement benefit. And before we continue to, Mr. Campbell, right? Mr. Hamilton, come around. And just come right up the aisle there, and I will tell you to stop. Come right up. So just stop right there. So members, I ask you to recognize the latest addition to the chamber. Young Mr. Michael Hamilton is an 18-year-old graduate from the Yallas High School, and he will be with us for a time. Welcome. Thank you very much. That I looked so well put together at 18. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate are the following: annual reports of the National Council on Education for the period 2018-2019, annual reports of the National Education Trust for the period 2021-2022, annual reports of the Management Institute for National Development for the financial year 2022-2023, and its related ministry paper numbered 104 of 2023. Ministry paper number 105 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated August 28th, 2023. Ministry paper number 106 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated September 11th, 2023. Ministry paper number 107 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated September 25th, 2023. The Bauxite and Alumina Industries Special Provisions Associated Producer, Discovery Bauxite Operations Limited, number 2 order 2023 and its resolution under the Bauxite and Alumina Industries Special Provisions Act. The report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the bills shortly entitled 1. The Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act of 2023, number 2. The Offences Against the Person Amendment Act of 2023, and finally, the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act of 2023. The Auditor General's Department certified appropriations accounts from the Management Institute for National Development for the years 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Bills brought from the Honorable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honorable Senate. I have the honor to advise the Honorable Senate that on the 5th day of December 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Copyright Act and for Connected Matters was passed in the House of Representatives without amendment. Signed, Juliet Holness, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Madam. Petitions. papers. Reports from committees.
Mr. President, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review and report on the Cybercrimes Act 2015.
Thank you, Minister. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move, be it resolved that the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review and report on the Cybercrimes Act 2015, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 8th day of December 2023, be adopted. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions. Senator Dr. Morris, I know that on the last occasion, the Minister who has some responses to some questions had indicated that they were ready, but at the time you were out of the jurisdiction, and today it is the Minister who is out of the jurisdiction. So hopefully on the next occasion when we sit, we'll be able to deal with that. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister Hill, I recognize you as acting leader. But as they say, one day busher is still a busher. You can address me from a seat other than your own. Thank you.
Mr. President, I appreciate the courtesies you extend to me. And we do intend today, Mr. President, clearly we are in the Christmas spirit. Mr. President, today it is our intention to continue the State of the Nation debate with contribution from Senator Don Webby. But before that, we're going to have the presentation and debate on the cyber crime note that Minister Morris Dixon just mentioned. And indeed, Mr. President, we are going to start with that, the cybercrime note, and then will be followed by the State of the Nation debate by Senator Don Webby.
Thank you. So at that time, you would be asking for the continuation of the State of the Nation debate. So you take Senator Minister Dixon now.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion notice of which I gave earlier.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Cybercrimes Act was promulgated in December 2015. Section 25 of the Act makes provisions for its review by a joint select committee of the Houses of Parliament after the expiration of 3 years from the date of commencement of the Act. This review began in March 2021 and was concluded in April 2023. The Joint Select Committee of the Houses engaged in wide stakeholder consultations and incorporated contributions from various entities. To that end, public notices were placed in the Sunday Observer and the Sunday Gleaner on March 28, 2021 and on April 25, 2021, and letters written to various stakeholders inviting written submissions. 10 entities made written and oral presentations to the committee on how to improve our cybercrimes legislative framework. The following entities contributed, and we are very grateful for their contributions: the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Ministry of National Security and the Communications Forensics and Cybercrime Division of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, and the Jamaica Technology and Digital Alliance, and they did a joint presentation, the Financial Services Commission, the University of the West Indies Department of Computing, the University of Technology Jamaica, the Jamaica Bankers Association, and Simtai Consulting Limited. So those are a lot of voices that were heard as a part of this review. The committee was supported by the technical and legal teams from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, the Legal Reform Department, the Attorney General's Chambers, and the Office of the Parliamentary Council. And this review was a very important review, and it was a very timely review. Mr. President, in an era where digital technology is deeply woven into the fabric of our daily lives, the importance of robust cybersecurity laws cannot be overstated. In the wake of technological advancement, there has been a notable rise in the employment of various tech tools and devices for executing sophisticated cyber attacks and threats. Often these advancements lead to novel methods for committing traditional crimes, and in certain cases, they give rise to entirely new forms of criminal activity. In our interconnected world, cybercrime has emerged as a sophisticated and evolving menace, impacting individuals, businesses, and governments alike. The dangers of cybercrime are manifold. At an individual level, cybercrime can lead to identity theft, financial fraud, and invasion of privacy. Personal data, once considered private, can be compromised, leaving individuals vulnerable to extortion or reputational damage. For businesses, the threat is even more severe. Cybercrime can result in the loss of sensitive data, intellectual property theft, and significant financial losses. It can disrupt business operations and erode customer trust, a critical component of business success in the digital age. Governments are not immune to these threats either. We are among the most likely to be targeted. Cyber attacks can target critical national infrastructure, disrupt government services, and even undermine national security. The potential for such attacks to destabilize societal structures and create chaos cannot be underestimated. One of the most significant examples of a cyber attack on a government is the 2017 ransomware attack by WannaCry, which had global implications. This attack targeted computers running the Microsoft Windows operating system by encrypting data and demanding ransom payments in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. The attack was unprecedented in scale, affecting more than 150 countries. The National Health Service in the UK, in the United Kingdom, was among the most severely impacted. Over 300,000 computers were infected, resulting in the cancellation of thousands of appointments and surgeries, and the overall disruption of healthcare services. This is the harsh reality of cybercrime. The growing threat of cybercrime is a menace that knows no borders and spares no one. Globally, these digital crimes are escalating at an alarming rate. According to the FBI's Internet Crime Report, financial losses from cybercrime exceeded $4.2 billion in 2020 alone. The most common types include phishing, personal data breaches, and ransomware attacks. And these numbers are not just statistics, they represent millions of lives disrupted, businesses bankrupted, and trust in digital systems eroded. Turning our focus to Jamaica, the scenario is equally concerning. The Jamaica Constabulary Force reported a significant increase in cybercrimes in recent years, with financial fraud and identity theft being the most prevalent. For a country striving towards digital transformation, these figures are a wake-up call to the urgent review and revamp of our cybercrime measures. Mr. President, behind every cybercrime statistic is a human story. Victims of cybercrime do not suffer financial losses, but also face long-standing psychological trauma. The psychological impact of cybercrime is profound. Victims often experience a sense of violation and helplessness, leading to a loss of trust in digital systems and institutions meant to protect them. Furthermore, the emotional toll of feeling vulnerable and violated can be devastating. These stories remind us that cybercrime is not just a technological issue, but a human one. The National Cybersecurity Strategy and legislation like this Act aim to fortify our digital space. However, government efforts alone are not enough. It is imperative for individuals and businesses to adopt good cyber hygiene practices, such as using strong passwords and being vigilant about suspicious emails. Another critical element is making a prompt report of any breaches. The threat of cybercrime is real and present. It requires a concerted effort from all of us, governments, businesses, and individuals, to build a safe and secure digital world. Mr. President, while it is impossible to entirely eliminate cyber incidents or the misuse of technology, it is critical to strive towards making our laws as robust and adaptable to technology as possible. This effort is essential to effectively address these unacceptable practices and their resulting consequences. Mr. President, to this end, the Cybercrimes Act aims to, 1, make the improper use of computers, computer programs, or data for criminal activities a punishable offense, including specific actions targeting computers, their programs, or data. One of the key sections of this Act addresses unauthorized access to computer programs or data. In today's world, where data is as valuable as currency, protecting it is paramount. The Act criminalizes unauthorized access, sending a clear message that such invasions of privacy will not be tolerated. Furthermore, the Act takes a comprehensive approach by addressing unauthorized modifications of computer data and programs. This is crucial in preventing malicious activities like the spread of viruses or the alteration of critical data, which can have far-reaching consequences. Another significant aspect of the Act is its stance on unauthorized interception of computer functions. This provision is particularly relevant in protecting the confidentiality and integrity of digital communications, which is a cornerstone of personal and professional interactions in the digital age. Mr. President, between 2017 and 2020, the parish courts disposed of 181 out of 294 cybercrime cases. Nonetheless, there are clear occasions of success, and that's one thing that we were looking at. In one instance, a former cashier at the Firearms Licensing Authority was convicted on May 29 in the St. James Parish Court after being charged in September 2013. The cashier pleaded guilty to being accused of using a skimming device to capture data from debit cards presented to her by persons paying for firearm licenses. There's another notable instance of the Act aiding justice. A female, despite vocally and repeatedly not consenting to being photographed and filmed in the nude, had her likeness secretly captured by her partner. After the relationship ended, her partner sent through WhatsApp a few of the videos that had been created. We're very happy about this one. Fortunately, she reported this grave violation, and her ex-boyfriend was charged, tried, and found guilty under this Act. He was sentenced to 2 terms of 12 months imprisonment at hard labor, and he was also ordered to pay a fine of $1 million or serve 4 months imprisonment in default of payment. So this Act is not just about penalizing wrongdoers, it's also about preventing and creating a safer digital environment for all. And I think that's really important, that sometimes we put these acts into place and, they just seem like legislation, but they actually have real meaning. And I think that these 2 convictions, which are just examples, show that we are doing the right thing in having these horrible crimes being identified as such. I'm going to go through an overview, Mr. President, of the report. Section 4. The recommendation was made to modify Section 4.1 to include more stringent penalties for offenses involving children. Furthermore, it was suggested that the penalties outlined in Sections 4 and 5 of the Child Pornography Prevention Act be taken into account. The committee endorses this recommendation, advocating for increased penalties for crimes against children with a clear distinction in the severity of punishment for offenses committed by minors compared to those by adults. The committee also endorsed an extension of the maximum prison sentence from 15 to 20 years for adults found guilty of committing a crime where the victim is a child. In relation to Section 8, Mr. President, which deals with computer-related fraud or forgery, a proposal was put forward to consider the establishment of an offense or set of offenses addressing the possession, creation, and distribution of electronically forged documents. The committee received information that under current legislation, forging certain documents is classified as a felony punishable by imprisonment ranging from 7 years to life. In contrast, forging other types of documents is treated as a misdemeanor carrying a maximum sentence of 2 years. Understanding that the Forgery Act is adaptable to technology and already addresses specific types of document forgery, the committee suggests revising the Forgery Act. This revision would encompass the creation of a general offense concerning the possession of forged documents with the intention to commit fraud or deception. Mr. President, in relation to Section 9, which is the use of computer for malicious communication, a stakeholder suggested amending the Cybercrimes Act to classify hate speech as a form of communication warranting punitive action. The Legal Reform Department, however, noted that this issue intersects with several constitutional rights, particularly freedom of expression. They proposed that the minister responsible for information should spearhead the development of provisions concerning hate speech offenses. Regarding revenge porn or the distribution of intimate images, it was brought to the committee's attention that some regions approach this issue in a technology-neutral manner, not limiting it to computer-based distribution. Therefore, it was proposed that the creation of an offense for revenge porn be included under Section 9, which already covers data published with the intent to harm or harass. As a result, the committee suggests amending Section 9 to, among other things, change publish to send and define publish as the act of sending, transferring, posting, disseminating, or otherwise making data accessible, and B, add a new subsection addressing intimate images. The committee expressed concerns about the frequent sharing of images from accident scenes involving injury or death, as it can distress the individuals, their families, and others depicted. It questioned whether the Cybercrimes Act covers such sharing, and if not, whether a provision addressing it could be added. After thorough consideration, the committee noted that Section 9(1) of the Act would cover these issues, but the intent to harm or cause distress would need to be proven. They also acknowledged the guidelines for prosecuting cases involving malicious communication from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. They observed that if intent cannot be established, affected individuals might need to seek civil remedies. Therefore, the committee recommends including information in the public education campaign about the Data Protection Act 2020, managed by the Office of the Prime Minister, to discourage sharing such images. The committee also suggests discussing with the police and the Director of Public Prosecutions how Section 9 can be applied in cases reported by citizens. Mr. President, in relation to Section 10, unlawfully making available devices or data for commission of offense, the committee agrees with the proposal to amend Section 10 to align with the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. The amendment would define an offense as committed by anyone who, without lawful justification, intentionally, 1, manufactures, sells, imports, distributes, discloses, or otherwise makes available A, a computer, B, any key, or C, any other data or device designed or adapted primarily for committing an offense under Sections 3 to 9, or 2, possesses or receives any item mentioned in subparagraphs A, B, or C with the intent that it be used by someone to commit an offense under Sections 3 to 9. Mr. President, in relation to Section 11, offenses related to protected computers, Section 11 of the Cybercrimes Act aims to impose more severe sanctions for offenses involving or targeting computers and/or systems, the disruption of which would critically impact security, public service, and public health and safety. The committee agrees with a stakeholder's recommendation to expand Section 11 to include protected computer systems crucial for or directly used in revenue services. They also recommend changing medical to health in Sections 11(2)(e) for broader applicability encompassing all health systems. Mr. President, in Section 15, in relation to compensation, considering a stakeholder suggestion, the committee recommends amending Section 15 to establish a regime akin to Section 24A of the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2018. This change would make compensation a more standard outcome, not solely at the court's discretion or upon the complainant's request. Mr. President, in relation to Section 19, record of seized material, Mr. President, a stakeholder raised concerns about the vague time frame for executing warrants and listing seized materials, noting that as soon as possible was too indefinite. The committee acknowledged that compiling a list of seized items depends on various factors, including the data size and legibility. They were advised that establishing standard operating procedures for these investigations might be beneficial. Therefore, the committee recommends incorporating standard operating procedures into either the primary or secondary legislation as part of the investigative processes, even if there are only specific guidelines on actions timeframes. In relation to Section 20, Mr. President, on forfeiture, the Cybercrimes Act authorizes the Director of Public Prosecutions to seek a forfeiture order outlining the criteria for a parish court judge or a Supreme Court judge to issue such an order. It was proposed to broaden the category of officers who can apply for forfeiture to include clerks of court. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions confirmed that the current wording prevents clerks of court from applying for forfeiture after a conviction. Therefore, the committee recommends amending Section 22 of the Act to make reference to prosecution instead of the Director of Public Prosecutions in order to include all facets of the prosecutorial service into the ambit of those who could apply for forfeiture. Other than amendments to existing sections of the Act, stakeholders made several recommendations for the inclusion of new offenses. Some of these included cyber stalking, cyber defamation, cyber threats, cyber bullying, webjacking, phishing, spoofing, spamming, social engineering, all of those terms that we tend to use in the cyberspace. In its consideration of these offenses, the committee found that various provisions of the existing Cybercrimes Act treated with some of these offenses, while other pieces of legislation were better suited to address others. These laws that would have to be looked at in tandem include the Child Pornography Prevention Act, the Defamation Act, the Education Act, the Larceny Act, the Law Reform Fraudulent Transactions Special Provisions Act, Obscene Publications Suppression of Act, Offenses Against the Persons Act, Sexual Offenses Act, and Terrorism Prevention Act. Further, Mr. President, the committee noted during its deliberations that some of the general concerns raised by stakeholders would best be addressed in cybersecurity legislation, such as the protection of critical systems, standards and guidelines for assessors of cyber services of protected systems, the establishment of a cybersecurity authority, and guidelines and standards for the protection of protected computers. The committee therefore recommends that cybersecurity legislation be drafted subject to consultation with stakeholders and cabinet's approval. And that's an important one. So this is the Cybercrimes Act that lays out the crimes, but we believe that there is need for a broader cybersecurity legislation that's going to put in place the provisions around protecting the critical systems in our country, especially in government, and having an authority that will be leading that effort. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Cybercrimes Act of 2015 is a robust framework that empowers Jamaica to effectively tackle the challenges of cybercrime. In light of these digital threats, the enactment of the Cybercrimes Act of 2015 was not just a legal imperative, but a societal necessity. It is a dynamic tool in our legal arsenal, ensuring that as technology evolves, our laws are equipped to protect and serve our nation. This act is a testament to Jamaica's commitment to combating cybercrime and protecting our digital infrastructure. The work of the committee will result in strengthened legislation. I would like to use this opportunity to extend my gratitude to Minister Vaz, who was the chair of the committee, for his stern and effective leadership, all the members of the committee for their active participation and commitment to the task at hand, the technical and legal officers from the various government agencies that worked assiduously in reviewing and conducting research in relation to every stakeholder recommendation, and the clerk to the houses and her staff for their support to the committee. Mr. President, I use this opportunity to invite contributions from my colleague senators, if it so pleases you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bunting, Senator Bunting.
I first of all want to commend the work of the Joint Select Committee and all those who made presentations. It really was I would say, a strongly bipartisan committee. There were not many disagreements. In fact, I was struck by the interest, the level of commitment. It was an unusual Joint Select Committee. It spanned about 2 years in its sittings. It was very technical issues. All online. But it was very technical issues that sometimes, I confess, even for myself as a non-technical person, you had to really struggle to follow some of the more technical aspects. But nevertheless, I think, most members really made a genuine effort to participate, to understand, to contribute, even if it wasn't so much in a technical sense, but in terms of the impact and what they wanted to achieve and what they wanted to address and what they wanted to be constrained. And I think it was a very commendable effort by all, although it took a while to get it done. And of course, it was during the whole COVID period and all of that, which added its own set of challenges. But as we work through the agenda of the committee, one of the things that struck me is that I think this was the 2015 Cybercrimes Act, and I think there were earlier versions. And as the years go by, the computer devices, Internet of Things, etc., they've become so ubiquitous, Mr. President, that almost any crime might have a cyber element related to it. And, when we many years ago, when the Parliament dealt with decriminalizing defamation, for example, and making it a civil matter, and most of us agreed it was a good thing then. But then when you started to look at cyber defamation and the damage that could be done without the traditional gatekeepers, for example, of media, which would have people trained in recognizing potential defamation, and editors who would, limit or eliminate stories that would carry that potential. not perfectly, but, you know, I would say they had filters that would protect or filter out 90% of the obvious cases. When you talk about social media now, there are no editors, there's no filter, and that defamation can be so damaging. And once it's there, it's basically there forever. You know, no matter the fact it was defamatory, it was false, it was cruel, it was revenge porn, whatever, it's virtually impossible to remove it. And it's there for all time, for generations. And so when we were looking at making it a civil offense as opposed to a criminal one, in those days we didn't anticipate. We didn't, so there were many members of the committee, and including myself, I must say I was, you know, conflicted about this, that thought maybe we need to make it a criminal offense. No, given the potential far-reaching and permanent implications that this would have for somebody's life and reputation, etc. If you look at law enforcement investigations today, digital forensics is perhaps the most important tool. If you look across the spectrum of offenses, from fraud to murder, every good criminal investigation department has to be to have very strong digital forensic capabilities. And I would dare say, you know, without speaking to any specific capabilities or methods of law enforcement, I think it is fair to say that probably the majority of serious crimes today are solved by either intelligence or evidence being provided from through digital forensics. There was another, perhaps, Senator Webby, given our associations with financial institutions, there was another issue that came up and during the deliberations, and that had to do with the impact of fraud, some various types of cyber fraud on financial institutions, and the fact that it had become an increasingly widespread, frequent, clever, cunning, devious methods that these criminals have been, have developed to rob both institutions and individual account holders. There's this sort of term that you use, Minister, social engineering, which is a sort of, as I understand it as a layman, it is a catch-all for basically conning people, right? You con people, you scam them, and get them to voluntarily trick them into giving up key information like passwords and those sorts of things that allow the criminals to clean out their accounts. Sometimes no fault of the financial institution. At other times, it may be the fault of the financial institution, and customers have complained bitterly at how long it takes them to recover their own funds, because sometimes the bank investigators, it takes months to resolve these frauds, to investigate them, to figure out who is culpable, figure out who is liable, bank versus customer. And even when it is, the customer was operated perfectly and was not at fault, oftentimes they're deprived of access to the funds, the legitimate funds in their account for extended periods of time. And so one of the recommendations that I would like to highlight from the report was the obligation or the recommendation that an obligation be placed on financial institutions to report, even if the specific client information is anonymized. But they should report these cases of fraud to the Bank of Jamaica or the FSC, as the case may be, so that the systemic risk can be monitored and assessed by the regulators. Because, you know, we may see it as on the margins today, and it's not so marginal anymore. Banks in the old days, Mr. President, would prefer to just absorb the losses rather than suffer the reputational risk of the public at large knowing that they have been hit or their customers have been hit multiple times. But I think we have to move beyond that. Find a way perhaps to cauterize the individual risk to the banks or the individual embarrassment to banks or their customers. But certainly in aggregate, the regulators must have a handle on the scale of this issue so that they can ensure whatever mitigating measures need to be taken are taken before the risk rises to the level of threatening the system or even threatening individual institutions. So I really want to highlight that particular recommendation, Mr. President. There was another one that, you know, I think benefited from those members who perhaps were more trained or exposed as health practitioners, but even those of us who were, you know, just parents could appreciate the injury that could be done, particularly to minors, by some of the what should I say, the damages that can be done using cyber methods. You know, it was felt that there could be serious psychological injury or mental injury, whatever the terms were, and that, you know, it went beyond, you know, when Senator Brigham was going to school, you know, teasing would have been limited to the schoolyard or in the community from, you're at bus stop. No. No, I was suggesting that, like myself, you know, he would have attended school in the pre-digital era. You know, we were still using logarithmic tables and slide rules to do calculations. But so the impact that teasing or a bully could make was fairly limited in that time. But today, again, because of the ubiquitous nature of social media, of, you know, computer devices, the access of children widely, and the continuing nature of the material that you put out there into cyberspace, the psychological injury or harm that could be done, particularly to minors, I think was brought home during the discussion and the debate. And it's unfortunate that both in this case, because the issues are so technical, that many of the recommendations you will see, it says we recommend that, in this case, the Ministry of Health and Wellness consider amending a related act. And in another part, you'll see we recommend the Ministry of National Security. But as I started off by saying, the truth is that there's hardly any offense today, whether from fraud to violent crime, that doesn't have an element that could be facilitated, could be touched on, or could be investigated using cyber forensics or digital forensics. And so this is an area that is not going to diminish in importance. I think bipartisan approach was encouraging, and I believe and I hope that it will continue in this spirit. The report is the first step, Minister. But I think anyone reading the report, and more so those of us who had participated at the level of the Joint Select Committee, will realize that the report is really just a beginning. There's a lot of technical work that will now have to be done, technical by your ministry, but really it will have to be a collaboration across a group of ministries to see how we can continue to adapt not just our laws, but our monitoring capabilities, our regulatory capabilities to keep abreast of the rapidly changing cyber environment and the potential risks that it poses, whether economically, commercially, mentally, physically. At the same time as we know that the potential for good is also enormous in terms of increasing productivity and efficiency. But, you know, it's one of those two-edged swords that, you know, the tool in a way is neutral. It's the user that determines whether it is used for good or evil. And I think this report is a first step to, well, not a first step because we had an act before, and in many ways it reinforced that the Cybercrimes Act in 2015 was a pretty solid act. And, you know, while we continuously, we can tweak and improve and evolve, the base act was quite thorough and appropriate, given, you know, the fact that it's 8 years old now, but in many, many cases, it is still relevant, and there was no need for any amendments to be recommended. Sorry? Well, at least you're paying attention this time. So maybe if you paid attention to the others, you would be more appreciative. But, Mr. President, I note that you were present 21 out of 21 sittings. And I want to acknowledge you. I will not do it often, but in this case, I really want to commend you as a member of the committee. Your participation was extraordinary. And as I said, we were perhaps the first amongst us, but I would say generally the participation was robust, it was genuine, it was bipartisan, and it showed appropriate concern of the parliamentarians for this issue. And we support the recommendations of this Joint Select Committee. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Bunting, and thank you for the acknowledgement. Let me grasp it before it dissolves. Senator Braham.
Mr. President, it's not the usual topic that I would dare to say anything about. And indeed, I have a little fear in embarking on an unknown area. However, I know a little about that. But this area, Mr. President, in recent times, in another aspect of my own life, I've been exposed to it, particularly the attack on email usage for the purposes of dishonesty and fraud. And I find out, Mr. President, that it is this activity extend to many small business people, professionals, lawyers, accountants, other professionals. It appears that one of the main tools of business communication now, if not the main tool, is by email. And subsequently, I have learned of spoofing and fisting and so forth. I won't go further to try and explain what they are. I fear that I don't properly understand. But what I have discovered is that persons have sent money, professionals, lawyers, accountants, to others, believing that the monies are being sent to the appropriate person. Yes? And many times it turns out that it is not. And when you examine the email requests or confirmation, I am told that in the past there would have been slight variation. Now they have advanced the matter so much that there's no variation at all. When you look at it, it is the exact thing that you thought. But under it, it has been copied over, I am told, on a fraudulent email, but you, the receiver, would not know. The implications, apart from the financial implications, there are professional implications, disciplinary committee implications, the ability to practice law, accounting, or whatever implication, because invariably the person who was entitled to the money is upset and will assume probably that the sender deliberately didn't send it or thieved the money. And it's a very serious problem. And so what I find and notice is that ignorance, Mr. President, is a very, very, very widespread thing in this area. So persons are sending emails and doing deals and so on, receiving emails, and they are not aware of this matter. Not aware, Mr. President. And even when it is brought to their attention, they don't know what to do. It is well and good when you can blame the bank, because you can then happen up on their office and camp out there trying to get back your money. And you probably get it back after 2 years or whatever period it is, but you do get it back. But when it is your quote-unquote mistake, and you send off monies to persons who are not entitled to it, you are left to give account. And so, Mr. President, it appears to me, and I join Senator Fraser Binns, I believe she would say this if she were planning to speak, that we need widespread education. But we, those of us who are in the professions, whether it is the law, the accountants, the engineers, architects, and so forth, they steal even architectural drawings now. I discover that architects, of course, do their work mostly now on computer, and find that sometimes their drawings are stolen by people in places that you have never heard the names, interestingly. But the ignorance is great, Mr. President, and I think that we, as individuals, business persons, lawyers, and other professionals, will have to take some responsibility to advise ourselves as to the potential, to advise ourselves what to do after there is an incident, if there's anything, so that we can do it, and to advise ourselves as to what steps we can do, some of them quite simple, in an attempt to prevent or to minimize loss as a result of this. This is just one slight area, Mr. President, but I know it is creating great difficulty. An expert who examined these things, and he was called to check on some computers, and I asked him, I said, well, for the month, how much of these you see? And he smiled and then laughed and said, well, today is Friday, this is the 4th one I am attending. I said, you mean in Jamaica? He says, yes. He deals with at least 4 or 5 a week, including in that case, somebody who lost $1 million US, not just pian money. So it appears to me, Mr. President, when I went to University of the West Indies, they had a thing called Use of English, which was a general course that everybody does. We probably do need a general course in this area where at the high school, every student gets it.
Pian is not a general language.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very powerful word. But the point about it is that something where you learn it almost automatically, so that you come up, just as how now, Mr. President, youngsters, when I went to high school to learn typing, was not the thing done. You know, only certain people did typing, it was felt. Now, all youngsters, without effort, types easily, no problem. It's not a problem. And so we need to bring it to that level, that once you graduate high school, you would have been fully aware of all of these matters, including some of the matters raised by Senator Bunting in terms of the deviant use of the technology, Mr. President. The work of the committee is, of course, invaluable, Mr. President, but as we speak, persons are suffering tremendous financial loss. Some of them too ashamed to mention, Mr. President. And I think that widespread education at every level, Mr. President, is of great value and importance to try to cauterize the situation. I commend the committee, Mr. President. I learned a lot from reading it. I think it has gone a far way to bring us into this knowledge of this matter. And I ask, Mr. President, that government consider encouraging these various professional bodies, business bodies, and of course the schools to educate their, should I say, constituents to the risk that is out there, Mr. President. Thank you very much, and I commend the committee for their work.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Sapphire Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Mr. President, sorry. I rise most definitely to, most definitely to support the report and the bill in front of us. Mr. President, I sat on the committee, and it was indeed a privilege for me to do so. Let me recognize that Ms. Joaquin Murray, who is one of the chief officers, technical officers who saw to this, we're both from Glenmuir High School. And it was indeed a pleasure for my alma mater and my former classmate for us to serve in this ray. Color red flagrants, who won the D Cup last week, by the way. So, I mean, I'm very honored to have shared this moment with Joaquin. And Senator Bunting, I was at 21 meetings too, you know. I was at 21 meetings. But Senator Gale, kudos to Senator Gale, whom oftentimes had to chair in the absence of our chairman. So thank you, Senator Gale, too. Mr. President, I celebrate this bill on many levels in terms of our effort to enable connectivity and efficiency within our space and the use of technology to do so. I recognize the value of it, and one of the reasons to why I related to my honor to be on that committee was the proverbial thing that I've been saying in terms of the reflection of healthcare and governance. I think this was one of the joint select committees where that was very apparent in terms of the need for the health voice, and particularly a mental health perspective. We have all persons who have spoken so far have related to especially this potential psychological impact that can be had in the virtual space. And whilst we seek to utilize technology, Mr. President, you know, it is not just about work efficiency and productivity, but also in healthcare specifically, our virtual space can be quite helpful. We can organize ourselves around our own schedules to do online workouts, to do physical activity that is enabled technologically. The whole premise of social media is about social connectivity and enabling interpersonal relationships. And of course, in terms of our spiritual health practice, it can be very useful. And all of these impact on our mental health condition. But Mr. President, I have to, of course, underscore the risk in terms of psychological impact negatively when it is the vulnerable who are oftentimes targeted. And so, Mr. President, I don't need to belabor that point because I think we all are cognizant of it. We have seen in other jurisdictions where websites and social media spaces, some of the more popular ones, have been implicated in lawsuits relating to online live suicides, where people literally go on a live and commit suicide. That's how extreme it can get. We have heard about cyberbullying. I myself have seen where persons could have a security camera in their child's playroom or in their child's bedroom, and all of a sudden the camera comes on and someone is in a foreign land many, many oceans away and is actually viewing that security camera installed inside the privacy of a home. So the threat is real. The other real situation that we are dealing with, and it is something that impacts on many levels, is the online gaming that a lot of our children engage in. And we are seeing that is happening in our space, a kind of an emotional reaction to it, where children are becoming angry, they are seeking to replicate some of what they're playing, the games, not appreciating the difference between reality and the virtual space. We see where some of the unfortunate mass shootings in the US, persons have linked some of the persons who perpetuate that to excessive online gaming. There was a horrible circumstance of a couple, I think in South Korea, who they were engaged in an online game for 3 days and ended up, the game was about caring for a virtual baby, and their actual child died because they were not caring for that child. So the dangers are real, Mr. President. Senator Braham embarked on a comment and a suggestion that I have written down here, but in a different way, where he spoke of the need for the integration of the online awareness and how to navigate such being integral to our possible education system. But Minister Dana, I would want to make an extra suggestion that I jotted down here. With the efforts that we're having at especially our Heart Academy to provide avenues of income generation and employment, might I suggest that we consider not just a course, if it pre-exists, in cybersecurity, the sophisticated aspects of it, but perhaps something where we develop a team, a cadre of persons who are able to engage in just the basic security measures for our population. I speak specifically to efforts at parenting online. Things like timed access to certain websites. Things like password encoding of access to certain websites. Things like the need for education as to safe sites. It's not the intense cybersecurity that is required for businesses, but this is now just the security that is needed in our daily lives, in our daily homes, and perhaps a hard course that offers this. Perhaps public education, PBCJ, tutorials being run that teaches parents that, okay, if you have an iPad or you have a Samsung tablet or you go into this setting, you go here, and you're able to enable your child to only access this website, etc., etc. These are basic, very basic security measures that could prevent a lot of risk later on. So I would hope that we can consider such. And again, like I said, tying into the public education that is needed. And I think it could be a good hard course for some of our young people. Mr. President, I also would like to bring attention to two aspects of the bill in our report that I am glad to see coming to the fore for us to further consider. Firstly is point 17, regarding the recommendations between the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology for the aiding and abetting, regarding the aiding and abetting of child dealing for purposes of sexual abuse. And the recommendation being that there might be an expansion of the Offenses Against the Person Act, the Sexual Offenses Act, Section 9, to be more thorough with respect to the offenses possibly against our children there. The second aspect of it, the report, that I would like to definitely bring attention to is the endorsement from this Joint Select Committee for recommendations regarding the review of the Mental Health Act. This was another one where we recognize how far-reaching this is, and the need for us to modernize our Mental Health Act to be in keeping with technology, the needs of society nowadays, but also the protection of vulnerable populations within our space. And so, Mr. President, you know, one of the things that I try to, in terms of, like I said, we're getting a lot of concerns about our young people, especially in the social media spaces, and them sometimes comparing themselves to what they see online, and, you know, being able to separate reality from that existence that is oftentimes manipulated to project a certain imagery. And how I try to connect with the kids is, like I say, listen, you have a refrigerator at home, you have a toaster at home, your laptop, your cell phone is literally just like those appliances. The access and the technology is a tool to be used to enhance your life. You are in control of it. Don't reach a point where it is controlling you. And so, in closing, Mr. President, I would want to say and remind us of the balance that we must have as we pursue technology. Nothing beats pen and paper, one, but it is also shown that technology, especially when overused in childhood, it is shown where kids below the age of 5 years, if overexposed to the screen, can have negative impact on their cognitive development and their behavioral development. So I emphasize the balance for health in terms of it is a tool, it is like your fridge, it is like your toaster, it is for you to use to enhance your life otherwise, but ensure that our basics of humanity still exists. With that, Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Longmore. Senator Golden Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I didn't intend to speak this morning, but I just felt it necessary to make a couple of remarks in respect of this report. I joined the committee in the latter stages, the last 10 meetings, I think it was. And so in the beginning stages, I wasn't present, although following. And I just want to say a few things in relation to our children. I've had the experience myself as a mother where one of my children met a person online who she thought was a similar 12-year-old girl to her. And they apparently were talking online, unbeknownst to me, because you can't police them on the computer every day. Well, the long and short of it, it's not a bad story. I then insisted that I meet this person's family, mother. A video meeting was arranged, and we had a few video meetings over time, and they're fast friends 3-4 years later. But I want to point out the importance of this bill because the committee work was so technical. We might not have captured the attention of the general public as much as we do some of the other Joint Select Committees that we work on. And there's a foundation in the UK called the Breck Foundation. The Breck Foundation was started by young 14-year-old Breck's mother, who was murdered after he was groomed online and left his home in pursuit of this friend who he could not have understood or contemplated was not the similar teenager as himself at the time, and this was several years ago. He was eventually murdered. So this bill has, this report and the amendments being proposed have really far-reaching and very practical application to our everyday lives. And I just wanted to underscore that. It's a point that has been made by my colleagues, but I just wanted to share those things. I have another experience myself 20 years ago, in fact, more than 20, probably 25 years ago, in between my undergraduate and graduate studies, I came back to Jamaica for about 4 years. And during that time, someone got a hold of my identity in the United States, and by the time I returned for further studies, I had something in the region of $20,000 US in credit cards taken out under my name. It took me almost 3 years to convince the authorities that it wasn't me because I had not been present in the jurisdiction. And during that time, it made life absolutely difficult. I couldn't get a credit card, I couldn't rent a car, I couldn't even rent an apartment in my own name. That's how difficult it made things for me. So today, nobody's physically taking out, signing things in a store. Today, they're doing it right through your computer, right in your living room. They're capturing your personal information. And it is a welcoming addition, the amendments being proposed, that we're going to tighten up the penalties and the provisions that govern those kinds of offenses. I say a last thing, Mr. President, and that is in relation to the professionals that support the protection that we need, both as individuals using the internet and our computers, and businesses, the businesses that Senator Brigham spoke about. It is very difficult, Mr. President, to find competent IT professionals who serve the MSME market. There are loads of them for the huge companies. There are not as many for the small business who can't afford the kind of IT services bills that the bigger, larger companies can. So I'm making an appeal. in light of what dangers are exposed, that we are exposed to, for the entrepreneurs to look at business models that contemplate MSMEs. Because while we are moving to ramp up our business and to export, as our business minister has been urging us to do, we are doing most of our transactions online. A good portion of my own clients as a lawyer now, I have never met physically. I've met them online and they come referred, but I have not met them physically. So I urge our nation, our entrepreneurs in this area, to contemplate the models that will serve the MSME community so that they too can put in place the protections that will guard against the kinds of offenses being perpetrated against them as is contemplated in the current bill and the amendments to follow. Mr. President, I wholeheartedly support the proposals of the committee. I commend it to my colleagues. May it please you.
Thank you very much. Senator Minister Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's clear that a lot of people love this topic, and I'm very pleased at the discussions today, and I'll just respond to a couple of things really quickly. The reporting element that Senator Bunting would have brought up in relation to financial institutions, that is something that we're definitely recommending to be placed in the cybersecurity bill that we are about to start working on, and that piece of legislation is going to be critical. Public education is also very important, and we have heard the discussions here. We've had last month in October, it was, well, 2 months ago now, we had Cyber Awareness Month, and we did a lot of activities across schools educating our children about the dangers of the cyberspace, and that is very important. And I tell you, I know Senator Longmore spoke about, how we can control the devices and so on. Our children are very smart. They're very technologically savvy. We have very strong controls in my house, and one of my children has figured out how to go around every single one of those controls. And I do not know how they were able to, and my husband is pretty senior in IT. But our children know what to do, and so it's very important that we teach them about the dangers of this space. And we are working with the Ministry of Education, and the administration sees this as very important. And I think from the discussions we've seen that cybercrimes are real and they have a human impact. And I think the thing for me that was so very powerful in looking at the report and looking at the crimes that have been reported, a lot of our women have reported crimes about revenge porn. And I think in seeing this conviction, seeing at least one evidence of conviction, it says to our women, you don't have to suffer in this manner. And it also says to our men that you can be charged for doing things like this. And it has such danger and harm. And I'm very pleased that we can have a piece of legislation like this. And important, and I think Senator Bunting spoke to it, this was done in 2015. And we have some changes to make, especially in tightening up in relation to the crimes against children, but it's a very good piece of legislation. And a lot of times we talk very negatively about ourselves and us as legislators, but we can do really good pieces of legislation that can stand the test of time. And it's a testament to our legislators and also to our technical team. And that's one thing that I would love to note in this review of this legislation, how good we have been in relation to this area. And so CTD Murray, thank you for your lead in a lot of this technical work and in terms of you moving us forward. Next steps, Mr. President, will be to make these amendments and take it through that process and to start the work of developing the Cybersecurity Act, which will strengthen the other elements of the cyber framework that we have. Mr. President, consequently, just before you asking for approval of the motion on the report, I would like to state on record for the purposes of the Hansard that the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review and report on the Cybercrimes Act 2015 was actually laid on the table of the Senate on May 12, 2023. And having said that, Mr. President, I now ask that the motion be approved.
Thank you very much, Senator Minister Dixon, and to all who contributed to this most informative debate, and members would have heard the motion. Those in favor? Against? Minister Hill?
Mr. President, I too thank Mr. Morris Dixon and the other contributors to this cyber security report and passage. And we now continue, with your permission, Mr. President, the State of the Nation debate, and I'm pleased to hand over to you to ask Senator Don Webby to continue.
The question is that the State of the Nation debate continue. Those in favor? And also ask Senator Don Webby to make his contribution.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And thanks, God. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to contribute to the State of the Nation's debate. To begin with, I must thank God for his blessings and the health and strength to stand in this honorable house today. I am so grateful for the opportunity to serve as a senator in this honorable house, and I want to thank the most honorable Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, for the trust he has placed in me to fulfill this role. Believe it or not, colleagues, this is my third term as a senator. And let me say it is an honor and privilege, and it's a job that I take very seriously. I want to recognize who are all online watching, to my wife and my 3 children, Nicholas, Stephanie, and Abigail. I want to say thank you for your support and love over the many years. I want also to recognize my Grace Kennedy family, some who are here in the chamber, and a lot of them, I can assure you, are online watching this presentation. Also to the board and directors who support me in this capacity to deliver on my responsibility as a treasurer, as a senator. I also want to recognize, Mr. President, for your excellent leadership and guidance of the Senate. Also to the leader, I see that Senator Floyd Morris is agreeing with my position of your excellent leadership of the Senate. To the leader of government business who is away on business, government business, I want to thank you for your firm and graceful leadership. My fellow senators, Senator Bunting, on both sides, it is a pleasure to serve with you all in this house. I believe that it is an honor and a privilege for all of us, and it's one of the most important national calls to service. We must continue to give our best as the people of Jamaica expect from us to provide strong leadership in the best interests of Jamaica. Let me take this opportunity to wish Senator Lambert Brown, who I have been in touch with, a full and speedy recovery, and hopefully we'll see him again soon in this chamber. Senator Hill, I never thought I would say this in my wildest imagination, but for some reason I miss Senator Brown. And let me also wish my colleague and good friend, Charlie Sinclair, and don't listen to the rumors of our president. Charlie will be fine, and he did not jump through any window. The timely, colleagues, and efficient execution of our responsibilities as senators and the operation of the Senate would not be possible without the hard-working parliamentary staff of Gordon House, led by Mrs. Valerie Curtis, clerk to the Houses, Mrs. Curtis, in this festive season, I want to sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you and your team for your diligent service and the service that you provide for us in the Senate on a Friday. Thank you so much. You're doing a great job. Thanks a lot. You know, as I reflect on what I was going to say in the State of the Nation debate, the State of the Nation debate plays a significant role in this honorable House. It is an opportunity for us to reflect on our country's performance, the economy, and its impact on the lives of our people, the social infrastructure and the governance structure under which all aspects of the country operate. It is a time for us to listen to each other and pull from the discussions actionable statements that will propel Jamaica to taking us in a place and as the best country in the world. Mr. President, very often you have heard me refer to our Vision 2030, and I will make my contribution in the context of Vision 2030, hope and prosperity for all Jamaicans. Vision 2030, hope and prosperity for all Jamaicans. Vision 2030's objective is to make Jamaica, as we have heard, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Senator Hill, I know you'll appreciate this, but when you're making a presentation, you have to think of where we are coming from and recognize where we are coming from. And I want to share my thoughts on that. Mr. President, the debt to GDP ratio has been very high over the years. I refer to it commonly as the FinSAC era, 1991, 1992, when I was building my career. Colleagues, the debt to GDP ratio at that time was 193%, 193.5% of GDP. And interest rates, Mr. President, interest rates, Mr. President, interest rates, Mr. President, was 60%. Senator Fitzhenley, I remember doing a presentation to investment bankers in New York, and I was showing a PowerPoint presentation of interest rates in Jamaica, and the investment banker stopped me in the middle of what I was doing and said, I have a mistake. They could not believe the 60%. But that is the era we are coming from, and we must understand where we are coming from. Mr. President, in addition to that, and sometimes we have to look at where we're coming from. Many Jamaican-owned companies changed ownership to non-Jamaican-owned companies during that period. Many. I call it recolonizing. And in my opinion, as a private sector leader, Jamaica lost our entrepreneurial spirit and innovation to do business. Borrowing to repay.
Senator Bunting, this is very unlike you, you know. Would you allow your colleague to present?
No. I'm coming to you, Senator Bunting, because we are friends. I'm coming to you.
At the same time,
at the
same time, Senator Webber, do not be distracted because Senator Bunting has an interest in distracting you. So I'm going to ask you, please, Senator Bunting.
Mr. President, one thing about my presentations, I only deal with facts. Mr. President, borrowing to repay our debt crippled the economy. Our weak economic policies and lack of fiscal discipline cost us dearly. High debt left little resources to spend enough on social services such as health, education, and crime prevention. And that is why we are in this problem where we are now. Let me say this to everyone, and Jamaica is listening. Jamaicans have worked hard, too hard. Jamaicans have worked too hard. Public sector workers have made many sacrifices for us to reverse the gains we have made to reduce our debt and improve our economic outlook. We cannot forget where we are coming from. We must never, ever go back there. I say this, we cannot borrow our way out of the problems. We must grow our way out of the problem. Mr. President, we cannot truly achieve our Vision 2030 aspirations until we attain, Senator Hill, what I refer to as economic independence. Economic independence has evaded us for many years, and I'm addressing this one to my children and children friends, especially the younger generation who only know a Jamaica riddled by high debt and low economic growth. This government is intent in changing that narrative by sowing the seeds now, so the generations to come will reap the fruits of a bright future. That is why it's so important to remind the younger generation of where we are coming from, so they can understand where we are going as a country. The government of Jamaica over the last decade has made significant strides to change our outlook as a country. With the policies put in place and proper execution, and let me repeat that, with proper execution, Mr. Mayor, we are creating a future of economic independence where all citizens can enjoy our first world infrastructure, better roads, transportation, affordable health care and education, green spaces, safety and security. Mr. President, it is so pleasing that I can stand here and say, the debt to GDP ratio is now at 78%. Which means we are reducing the debt to GDP ratio to 60% by 2027 to 2028. This is well ahead of the Vision 2030 timeline. But let us, for a moment, do some comparison. Let us look at some comparisons. Facts are facts. Let's start at the point of 2015 and where we are now, Senator Dixon. In 2015, our net international reserves was 2.3 billion. 2.3 billion in 2015. Not bad. Mr. President, well, you said it. I used 2015 as the... Mr. President, our net international reserves today is 4.6 billion, twice of what it was in 2015. Mr. President, the unemployment rate was 14.2%. The unemployment rate was 14.2%. Unemployment rate is now 4.5%. Mr. President, I've heard my private sector colleagues speaking about importation of labor. And I must say, I might not be aligned with that narrative. I don't have enough information. And before we move in that direction, we need to do a comprehensive assessment of the needs analysis of Jamaica before we do that. Mr. President, when you look at our international rating, we're at B-, we're now at B+, which is the best ever we have ever received in the history of our country. Economic growth was negative. Now we have 9 consecutive growth of economic growth since 2023, up to 2023. And this is the most significant one, Senator Golden Campbell. In 2015, 60 cents of every dollar was used to pay debt. That's down to 30 cents. I think my senators should recognize that. Mr. President, I remember, and Senator Bunting will understand this, and I'm sure that he's going to agree, despite our disagreement with certain topics, right? 10 years ago, around that time, every board meeting that we were in, we'd spend an hour discussing the rate of exchange. And the rate of exchange, I would say, on both sides, was basically used as a political football. And it was the headlines of every newspaper with any movement. However, over the last 5 years, from February 2018 to 2023, the Jamaican dollar recorded an average annual depreciation of 4.1% against the US dollar. This is the lowest of any 5-year period in the last 25 years, from 1998 to 2023. Let me just repeat that again. Mayor. This is the lowest of any 5-year period in the last 25 years, from 1998 to 2023. And nobody talks about it in the boardroom anymore. So what I'm saying, Mr. President, and facts are facts, the data is there. All the economic indicators are the best it has ever been in the history of our country. And these indicators must be placed in the context of approximately 3 years of COVID-19 pandemic, the worst global crisis we have ever seen in our lifetime. So, Mr. President, instead of spending in 2015 60 cents of every dollar to pay debt, now we're only spending 30 cents. So we have 70 cents of each dollar to spend on better roads, transportation, affordable health care, education, and security. There's one big issue that the world is facing. One big issue, and it's called inflation. And the truth is that every Jamaican is feeling the impact of inflation. Senator Bunting, my professor, and I thought of you when I was making my notes. A professor I had in college teaching economics gave me this definition of inflation, or described inflation for me. And I'm not sure why Senator Peter Bunting came to mind, but I'm going to share what that definition is. I'm going to share what the definition is, and Senator Hill, I thought of you second. So it says, Senator Fraser Binns, this is the definition of inflation as given to me by my professor, and this is in the early days. He says, inflation is when you pay $15 for the $10 haircut you used to get for $5 when you had hair. Let me say it again. I know you understand that. It says inflation is when you pay $15 for the $10 haircut you used to get for $5 when you had hair. And I'm following closely behind Senator Bunting and Senator Hill. So essentially, people's, and it's a reality, people's disposable income is less. And this is worldwide. And it is purchasing less goods and services than the average household could purchase a few years ago. And the truth is, inflation is affecting everybody across the world. In fact, Senator Scott Matchley, you know the business that I work for, we are in remittances. And I had the opportunity to have dialogue with members of the diaspora. Because there was all kind of speculation of why remittances are down in the country. The first time in my professional life that I've seen remittances down. 2%, 1%, and so on. And I asked the gentleman, he's a resident of California, of why you think remittances are down for Jamaica. He said, Don, I'm going to give you the example. He said, 2 years ago, it cost me $35 to fill my gas tank. Now it's costing me $75. In other words, our diaspora or the senders of remittances to Jamaica, their disposable income has gone down significantly less, or is significantly less, so they don't have enough, they don't have as much to send. So what I've found in the business is that they're sending smaller amounts more frequently, but the overall inflows of remittances in Jamaica continues to be down. And the COVID relief has ended. That was a one-off bump, which you saw in 2021. But that's something that we have to bear in mind. I say this to say that inflation is significant in terms of the purchasing and disposable income of our folks. I mean, when you look at the United States of America, Cavan, Senator Gale, and you're a man with the trade union, inflation in the United States was 9.1%, the worst it has ever been in 40 years. Thank God it's heading in the right direction now. UK inflation was at 6.7%. So, Mr. President, based on the impact of inflation, one of the key priorities must be to reduce inflation. And I must say, Governor Biles and the Ministry of Finance with their monetary and fiscal policy is doing a good target by trying to bring it back within target. And I want to congratulate Senator Governor Biles and Minister Clark for sticking to the program in terms of bringing inflation down. So Jamaica inflation was well within the target of 5.1%. One of the things I'd love to see once inflation is under control is for a lowering of interest rates, because it's extremely important if we're going to have continued growth that we need to look at lowering of our interest rates. So, Mr. President, I understand the impact of inflation, and I know, because I speak to many, our consumers, our customers, they're having a hard time. Stretch every dollar to make ends meet. But this is not just Jamaica. It is a worldwide phenomenon. I want to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness and the government for listening. It is a trait of a good leader when a leader listens to criticisms and takes the steps to make a difference. So the cries of the people are being heard, and the government is working to remove the pain points to ensure that all Jamaicans, not just some Jamaicans, can benefit from the hard work, the sacrifice, the blood, sweat, and tears that have brought us to where we are today. If we continue to work together, we can achieve our 2030 aspiration, and I feel very confident that the best is yet to come. You know, and I'm going to give you some examples, colleagues. Sometimes when we talk, Senator Dixon, and you talk to the man, like my gardener, we call him Sherlock, and sometimes when I listen to this S&P and other statements, I say, what that mean to me? What that mean for me, right? And I want to share with you what it means in the sense that the government has been reinvesting in the social sector. So students from the PATH household can access grants towards their education, a total cost, Mr. President, of $252 million. $380 million was set aside to cover the cost of school transportation to PATH beneficiaries. That is when you manage the economy well, you can have the resources to support the PATH program. $3 million back to school support program for each of the 63 constituencies. Interest rates, Senator Briam, and the Students' Loan Bureau were reduced by 2%. A total of 1,000 STEM scholarships will be provided over 5 years at a total cost of $2.4 billion. And I know you'll be very interested in that, Senator Dixon. The STEM scholarship will be used to support Jamaica from low-income households. Our teachers are being upskilled so they can train the future generation to have the knowledge and skills to contribute meaningfully to the growth of Jamaica as a place of choice to live. Full tuition scholarship will be provided to 1,250 STEM teachers over 5 years. Over 1,000 parents will receive support this year through training in parenting. The government has also expanded the social pension program. Mr. President, I was pleased to hear that come next year, the government will double the gross salary of public sector workers at the lower end of the wage scale. Senator Gale, you have to touch me for that, man. Yes, man. Mr. President, we're a proud nation of proud people. And I can't speak for every Jamaican in this regard. Every Jamaican dream is to own their own home. Every Jamaican dream is to own their own home. It creates a sense of pride and it creates a sense of accomplishment. And this government has committed to making dreams a reality by providing 70,000 homes across the island under the affordable housing program. My understanding is that over 81% of this target will be achieved over the next 4 years, with over 52,000 units at various stages of the development. This is in addition to the housing that is being provided under the social housing program. The social housing program is aimed at bringing hope to those who are living in a substandard condition by providing them with a dignified living space. Over the time the program has been in place, 154 units have been delivered across the island. The government is making housing accessible to all, one house at a time, one title at a time, and we move closer to making Vision 2030 a reality. This is being done through increases in access to housing grants and reduction in interest rates through NHT mortgages. Under the systematic land registration program, which commenced in 2021, the National Land Agency, Mayor, has issued over 8,000 titles to Jamaicans. 8,000 titles to Jamaicans. This is a part of a 3-year initiative to issue 20,000 titles. The government is committed to creating a practical benefits for the people of Jamaica from the improved economic performance. Mr. President, this is a government also that cares about family life. This is a government that cares about family life. Caring for the people of Jamaica is not just about financial assistance, but also ensuring that the government supports quality family life for Jamaicans. A demonstration of this is the introduction of the paternity leave for public sector workers and the extension of maternity leave to 60 days. In addition, adoption leave is now available for 20 working days in recognition of the diversity of the family structure in Jamaica. Mr. President, the recent announcement of unemployment insurance. Mr. President, the government is moving to complete the prerequisites for the deployment of unemployment insurance. This will further bolster the social protection framework for workers. It provides a safety net of income while persons during their search for new employment. I really want to commend the Cabinet, and especially to the Honorable Colonel Charge for his focus in this critical area of unemployment insurance. You know, when I'm standing here, the amount of Shireen, Senator Shireen, the amount of good news you have, you could go on and on and on. You could go on and on and on. The 200 electronic buses, deployment of the garbage trucks. But this is a big Senator Bunting. This is a big one. This is a big one. This is a big one. When you think about the road infrastructure, it's being improved across several projects under our road network, Spark program. And Minister Clark and I had many discussions about that. The shared prosperity through accelerated improvement. I don't think, Senator Hill, I'm going to say this one slowly, right? I don't think that's right. This is a 40 billion investment in our infrastructure. Over 2,000 roads will be rehabilitated. 40 billion and over 2,000 roads will be rehabilitated. Modern infrastructure is necessary to facilitate the economic development of the country. Look at the Montego Bay Perimeter Road Project, which was funded, Montego Bay Perimeter Project, which was funded from our own treasury. It is a big compliment to the management of this country. The truth is that these align with the Vision 2030 in terms of reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure to support economic development and human well-being, with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all Jamaicans. All of what I've highlighted would not have been possible or even imaginable unless the economy of Jamaica was being properly managed in a responsible fiscal manner. Mr. President, there's one issue that has been on my mind, and I've included it in my presentation, and I know Senator Bunting used it here and I supported it at the time. So let me just go through. Mr. President, there has been a lot of discussion on both sides of the House about the efficiency of our public procurement process, and there seems to be consensus that significant improvement is needed. The truth is that capital expenditure is vital for increasing the productive capacity of the economy, as I've mentioned. And we did discuss it in the context of the security budget and a fraction of it being spent. And if crime is our number one problem, you need to prioritize. Unfortunately, the procurement process, in my mind, has been hampered by the deployment of funding for a much-needed capital project. It seems that there's still an issue with the red tape in getting approvals. As you are aware, based on accounting procedures, government accounting procedures, if you don't use it, you lose it. I've raised the issue before in the House, as mentioned, and I mentioned it last year. I don't have the exact date in terms of the Ministry of National Security expenditure, but it must be a priority. I want to call again for a comprehensive review of why capital budgets are not being utilized and how we can get back on track to ensure that budgetary applications are fully dispersed. I was happy to hear that Honorable Minister of Finance have committed to amending the Procurement Act to increase the effectiveness of the procurement system, and I am in full support of that commitment. I believe...
Senator Bunting.
Thank you, Ms. I'm trying to remember. Okay. Since Senator Webby is just breaking into his stride and increasingly agreeing with me on so many points, I think he should be given extensive time. In fact, whatever time is required to complete, and I hope he doesn't switch from the Jekyll to the Hyde by the end of his presentation, as you extended it. So I propose that his time be extended sufficient to complete his presentation, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister Bunting. Members would have heard the expansive request. Those in favor?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Bunting and colleagues. And this is not a private sector collusion. We know that, right? So, Mr. President, we're speaking about the public procurement process and the economic impact it has. I want to say that I also believe that we need the right resources, and this is an important point that I want to make, Senator Morris. I also believe that we need the right resources with the proper training and skill sets to implement capital projects. The objective of capital programs must be what I describe as SMART. It must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be achievable, it must be realistic, and it must be time-bound, and we must hold people accountable for what they are presenting. Mr. President, I want to touch briefly on the issue of crime. I sincerely believe, Mr. President, that all of us, all Jamaicans, all of us in the Senate will agree that we love our country dearly. All of us love Jamaica. We might disagree on policies, we might have other disagreements, but there's one fundamental fact. Whether you are PNP, JLP, or no P at all, we love our country. I strongly also believe that every well-thinking Jamaican wants their children to grow up in a safe society. There's a lot that is happening right, and I pointed out a significant amount of them in my earlier presentation. But I cannot deny, as I stand here in this honorable house, that crime continues to be a significant challenge in our beloved nation. And I agree with the Prime Minister when he used the word local terrorism, when I see what is happening. So I want to use this opportunity. I want to thank, Mr. President, the members of the security forces, the JCF and the JDF, for their commitment to protect and serve. I want to thank them. We must, as a country, private sector, public sector, whatever P you want to be, stand in solidarity with the security forces against the scourge of crime in our island. The security forces must be given all the resources and a robust legislative framework to assist them in the fight against crime. I know what I say is not going to be popular over my colleagues' sides. I still believe, Mr. President, the SOEs is one tool in the toolbox to fight the crime problem. And I've seen the positive impact it has made in restoring a sense of security in the crime-riddled communities. I still maintain that the SOEs is an important tool in the toolbox. But to eradicate crime is not going to happen overnight. We know the government alone cannot solve the social issues we face as a country. The private sector must get involved, and I speak as a leader of the private sector. So I want to commend the PSOJ, and especially my good friend Keith Duncan, for which has been embarked on an initiative called Project STAR, the largest ever privately led social transformation project in Jamaica, focused on building communities through an all-society approach. I want to thank the PSOJ, and I want to recognize Keith Duncan for his passion and commitment to get this done. Mr. President, another area that I'd like to touch on, and as somebody said, wide-ranging. I am pulling everything together. Mr. President, one of the areas I'm passionate about, which is being discussed all over the world, is the issue of food security. I want to commend the Honorable Minister of Agriculture on the Eat Jamaica campaign, which seeks to boost food security and sustainable farming practices. I've said on many occasions in the boardroom and outside of the boardroom that Jamaica needs to cut its import bill. Jamaica needs to cut its import bill from US $1 billion to $500 million by 2030. To achieve this, we need more import substitution. The right policies, business environment, and incentives will provide a backing to attain this target. We must increase production to improve food security, raise productivity, and create sustainable value-added food products. We must train and develop our human capital to improve productivity significantly. We must roll in the red tape and roll out the red carpet for our local farmers, manufacturers, and other business so they can build capacity to produce domestic goods at a reasonable price and increase local consumption for export. I want to take this opportunity to recognize and congratulate Senator Albin Hill. Senator Hill, I want to big you up. And the work he's doing in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to grow exports. For the first time in several decades in our country, we have had a surplus in our current accounts. This means, Senator Marks, I'm going to tell you what it means, because it looks like you don't understand what it means. This means Jamaica is a net exporter of goods and services. That's all it means. For the first half of this year, earnings from exports increased by over 30% over the same period last year. Again, I want to support Senator Hill's commitment to grow all sectors, including small businesses, so Jamaica can compete on a global scale, diversity of its economy, and fuel economic growth. The other point I'd like to raise in relation to agriculture and food security is the vexing topic of predial larceny, which I cite on the news last night. And sometimes it's so sad you feel like you want to cry. It is a huge, huge problem in Jamaica. I gleaned from several newspaper reports that on an annual basis, over 8 billion in goods have been stolen from farmers. How sad is that? And it's small farmers. One sector player indicated that it could be up to 5 times that amount. The loss of income and livelihood from theft forces farmers to seek alternative income sources outside of the agricultural sector and pursue other careers other than farming. The effect of predial larceny is to threaten food security and the stability of rural farming communities. While combating predial larceny requires a combination of measures, I'm heartened that harsher penalties will be imposed to curb the persistence of this type of theft. At the same time, there must be proper enforcement of the legislation to send a clear message that predial larceny will not be tolerated. The Agricultural Warden Program, I want to encourage Minister Floyd to prioritize that in getting this going, the Agricultural Warden Program, to try and curb as best as possible predial larceny. You know, Senator Scott Matley, when you see the news item, Senator Fraser Binns, and a little man have a cow or a few goats, and then ride up and take the man goats, that is his livelihood, you know. I mean, it is so, so, so sad. We have to do something about it, and we have to, as I said, we have to enforce the laws. The laws are there, we just have to enforce it. In wrapping up, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I could not complete my contribution without speaking about Brand Jamaica. We must protect Senator Hill and harness the power of Brand Jamaica and use it to our advantage. I'm therefore extremely pleased that Cabinet approved the development of a nation brand strategy and brand identity for Jamaica. Brand Jamaica is a valuable asset, and that has great potential to extra value for us as a country. Brand Jamaica. Mr. President, this leads me to another area of which I'm extremely passionate about, and is the area of sports. Sports is a key aspect of Brand Jamaica. We have a rich culture, heritage, and legacy as a country, which others have recognized. Jamaica is the home to the world's best athletes. Our Vision 2030 includes a long-term strategic plan for sports in Jamaica. It is built on a number of key elements which strengthen the role of sports in economic, social, and cultural development by addressing all aspects. The number of trained coaches and administrators, the number of sporting facilities, etc., etc. I want to commend the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport. I tease her all the time, that's the longest title I've heard, Babsy Grange, and the work by her ministry for spearheading and to improve the benefits for eligible national athletes under the Jamaica Athletes Insurance Plan. A national sports sector policy was developed, and from my research, that policy was in the process of being revised. If we are to achieve Vision 2030, the policy needs to be prioritized. We need to set clear objectives and initiatives and the KPIs to measure success. The focus areas that resonate with me for the policy are: 1, business opportunities for the entrepreneur; 2, sports tourism; 3, sports for peace, the role of sports in reducing crime; and 4, athlete development, valuing our assets. You know, when I was doing my research on sports, estimates are that the North American sports market will reach US $83 billion by 2023. No, 83 billion. My point is, colleagues, that sports is big, big, big business and could be a significant economic driver for Jamaica. When you look at the Premier League, the EPL, for example, recently signed a multi-billion-dollar deal for a television right deal. I want to speak on what is often referred to as a Greenfield Stadium. It has been recognized from time to time again as having a major role in the development of sports tourism. The stadium is an asset, but based on data that I was able to find, is currently costing taxpayers $50 million per year in operating expenses, with little opportunities to generate funds for maintenance. So sad. My vision of the possibilities for the stadium is to create a world-class sports stadium and entertainment center with an Olympic-sized running track and swimming pool. It is much more than a cricket stadium. We can capitalize on our year-round warm climate, and the proximity of the stadium to major hotels on the North Coast is a huge, huge asset for sports tourism. The stadium, I have been there a few times, has the most beautiful view of the Caribbean Sea. The stadium can be utilized to host training camps for athletes and host international events. I make no apology by saying, Jamaica, we have the best sprint coaches in the world, right here in Jamaica, Glenn Mills and Stephen Francis. I make no apology that we have the best coaches in the world. And that is a competitive advantage. So I'm still looking forward to the development of the facility, making it a world-class venue to host both amateur and professional sports bodies, both local and overseas, at the highest level. I had a discussion with Minister Grange, and I was very pleased to hear that there are, in fact, plans under the way to have a phase 1 of the development, and I want to congratulate her again, the hard-working sports minister, to try and get this done. I have a few comments coming out of my discussion with her, few suggestions. I believe, Mr. President, and the initial estimate to bring it up to a certain level is about $12 million US. That's a Greenfield Stadium, roughly about $12 million US. And I believe that this should be done through what I describe as a public sector, private sector partnership to get it done. I hope I don't offend anybody, but when I think about the large sporting bodies that have benefited significantly with associating and sponsoring some of our athletes in Jamaica, I want to say to them, as a senator and as a private sector leader, it is time for them to invest in the infrastructure of Jamaica. It is time for them to put their money where their mouth is and enter into a public sector, private sector partnership to develop the Greenfield Stadium. I'm also making a suggestion, Mr. President. I believe that when we have the plans in place and the vision pinned down, I want to suggest strongly that we rename the stadium the Usain Bolt Stadium and Entertainment Center. Usain Bolt Stadium and Entertainment Center in honor of the world's fastest man. And he's a son of Trelawney. And I want to tell you something. As a businessman, Senator Bunting, you know when you get the branding of a superstar like Usain Bolt, the private sector support is going to come. I believe that we have an asset there that can be fantastic and can be a world-class facility. Usain Bolt Stadium and Entertainment. Mr. President, I'd like to end my contribution today of how I started with Vision 2030. I believe, Mr. President, if we work together, our future is bright, and we can make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I have a dream about Jamaica, the Jamaica we all want, the Jamaica we deserve, the Jamaica we deserve. And these words were echoed by one of our Governor Generals, and I've modified it a bit. And I'll share with you what my dream is for Jamaica. A Jamaica where we have equitable access to quality education and training. A Jamaica where we have access to timely and quality health care. A Jamaica where our unique environmental and cultural assets are preserved. A Jamaica where entrepreneurial and creative talents thrive. A Jamaica where we are all safe and secure. Vision 2030, hope and prosperity for all. Mr. President, from the bottom of my heart, I stand here as a senator. I want to say, as we come up to the festive season, God bless Jamaica, the greatest country in the world. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Webby. Minister Hill.
Somebody was standing on the floor, Senator Fraser-Binns. I wait for the President. Mr. President, I too congratulate Senator Don Webby for a very comprehensive presentation on the state of this wonderful nation called Jamaica. I'm very pleased to note that he was so comprehensive and so thorough that Senator Bunting had to be on his feet to say, I completely agree with what Senator Webby has said. Congrats, Senator Webby. Great job. And Mr. President, it is not our intention to do further business for today.
We're going to ask for the suspension.
I'm going to ask for you to suspend the State of the Nation debate for a date to be announced.
Okay, that's the first issue.
That's the first thing.
The question is that the State of the Nation debate be suspended for a date to be announced. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. And Minister Hill, you know that I think that Senator Morris has something to say on the motion for the adjournment.
I was not given that indication, but I'm very pleased to ask you to recognize him, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I was informed. Thank you, Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the
Go ahead, Senator
Okay,
Morris.
thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise on the motion of adjournment to raise a matter of national importance and to the members of this honorable chamber, because this week is being celebrated as International Week for Persons with Disabilities. And in fact, Sunday, December 3rd, constituted International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And this year, the theme for the celebration is entitled United in Action to Rescue and Achieve the SDGs for, with, and by persons with disabilities. And the theme has come against the background of the world being 7 years away from the date set for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And, Mr. President, it is felt globally that whilst some progress is being made, there are a multitude of challenges as it relates to persons with disabilities. And in some jurisdictions, we are languishing behind in terms of the targets that have been set for persons with disabilities in the SDGs. So, for example, Mr. President, and these are some of the things that we can relate to as a country, efforts to institute an inclusive education system. It's not being met with the sort of speed and effectiveness across the world that we should be experiencing because of a number of challenges, chief amongst which the inaccessibility of educational institutions for persons with disabilities, and also the lack of trained teachers and technology to assist children with disabilities in the classroom. And this week, we had a situation where the Jamaica Country Report, based on a UWI CDB sponsored study, was revealed, released to the public. And some of these things figured prominently in the report. There are challenges in terms of health care for persons with disabilities, as stipulated in SDG 3, where affordable and accessible health care for persons with disabilities remains elusive. The whole issue of employment for persons with disabilities, as delineated in SDG 8, is a problem with close to 90%, data showing close to 90% of the population of persons with disabilities in Jamaica and the broader Caribbean not having access to gainful employment. And for these to be achieved by 2030, we have to see a redoubling of efforts to make sure that these individuals are brought in the mainstream of society, and to ensure that the fundamental human rights of these individuals are realized. And speaking of human rights, Mr. President, next week, the 11th, will be celebrated as International Human Rights Day. And a part of the observation is a recognition of the fundamental rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities
globally. And I must indicate to this honorable chamber, Mr. President, never planned it to state it in this intervention, but since I'm here, the UN, they are experts and the professionals within the United Nations Treaty Body System that will be observing the Human Rights Treaty, 75 years of its existence from 1948 with the Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there will be a number of celebrations next week for that, so I leave tomorrow for Switzerland to participate in those activities. And a part of that recognition is a book that will be published on 75 years of our Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And yours truly have a chapter that is going to be featured in the book. It is one of 17 chapters to be highlighted in the book. And it is highlighting the challenges and difficulties that persons with disabilities have been confronted with, even though we have seen the establishment of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007. So, Mr. President, I am making an appeal for all and sundry within the Jamaican society to respect the human rights of persons with disabilities, but I am also making a call for us as a country to pay particular attention on the various targets set under the SDGs for persons with disabilities. When reports are being formulated, the reports must indicate what are the particular accomplishments as it relates to persons with disabilities, whether it be in terms of the effort for inclusive education, the effort to make sure that our health care is accessible and affordable, the whole issue of greater employment for persons with disabilities, and also, Mr. President, making our cities and towns more accessible for persons with disability. And I believe that if we can ramp up our efforts in this regard, Jamaica will be a better place for all of us, both persons with disabilities and those without. And I wish all the members of the community of persons with disabilities all the best in this week of celebration. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Morris. Minister Hill, in order for Senator Gill to respond, you're going to have to move the 120 motion.
Mr. President, the time being now 1:20, I ask that the time in the Senate be extended to accommodate the rest of the business for the day, including Senator Cavan Gill.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard that eloquent motion put, that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:20 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Senator Gill.
So, President, after that eloquent motion, sir, you know, I'm always compelled, based on my upbringing, to speak on issues and support Senator Morris on issues in relation to persons living with disabilities. And this compelled attitude, sir, is entrenched parentally, because my mother would have worked with children living with disabilities for 40 years. And so people, those living with disabilities, President, they are exposed to lower education. They are always this bi-directed connection towards poverty. And Senator Morris would have highlighted some critical challenges. President, if we are aware of the problem and do nothing about it, that makes it tragic. And I would want to compel us to, we are aware of it, but to do something about it is what is important. President, there are children, there are adults living with disabilities, there are consumers, there are employees. My concern today in relation to this is that we're moving in a digital age. And we call and speak about an inclusive digital economy. But that digital economy must include persons living with disabilities. And we're talking about accessibility. And they must be part of having that confidence in knowing that the transformation of the economy must include them. And so the need for protection, the need for protecting their rights, and to especially, President, the combating of discrimination is important. In this transformation, those persons living with disabilities must not feel discriminated. And so we must ensure, as Senator Morrison had indicated, ensure accessibility, allow for them also to have equal access to opportunities in any transformation. And so my call today is that, and we have Minister Dana Dixon Morrison, who is here, who has an awesome responsibility to transform our digital economy. But I talk about the digital skills that is going to be required to promote the upskilling and the reskilling of those persons living with disabilities. And I also want to strongly promote, Mr. President, that in this transition, employment in the digital age must include persons living with disabilities. And so, if we can, having identified the problems, having been made aware of the challenges, if we can agree on one thing, in working together, in fixing the problems, so that when the reports come out, the reports would make and give advantage from a different standpoint. And I want to suggest today that let us establish some sort of a partnership approach. Maybe Minister Dixon Morris Dixon, when you have the partnership, you may want to consider a subcommittee of the partnership that brings an all-inclusive approach that includes trade unions, employers, the state, the respective representatives from the community living with disability. And I want to suggest that academia plays a critical role in being part of that subcommittee of a partnership. So let's agree that we can establish this partnership to improve fostering the hiring of persons living with disabilities, promote reskilling and upskilling of those persons, and why I ask for academia to be a part of it, to develop open and accessible skills in this area, especially in a digital age. President, we must make the future of work for those persons living with disabilities to be all-inclusive. And so, the position that I want to take today is that let's work together to pursue this initiative Let's give it the attention that it really deserves, and let us ensure in this transformation to a digital space that no one feels left behind. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Gill. Senator Hill? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry. Senator Dixon. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I had to rise on this one. Many do not know that I have a child who is living with a disability. And I wanted to also note that it is really important that no child is really left behind as we move forward. And I want to thank Senator Gill for noting that, and of course for Senator Morris, who is really an inspiration for me, and I can know that my child will also have a good future in this world. But it is very difficult for so many of our children, and it is up to us to be able to put in place policies that are very much going to have them be a regular part of our country. And in doing that, I know in terms of my own work on digital transformation, I know that the digital tools are tools that can enable our members of our population who are living with disabilities to be more integrated into society. And as we do that, it's going to be very important that we focus on that element of inclusion and how we use the technology to empower these individuals who are just as valuable as anyone else in our society. And we feel very strongly about that. And so today, I also wanted to stand to say that the RGD is in a few weeks going to be launching birth certificates in Braille. Many of our persons who are visually impaired or blind, they've never seen or been able to really feel their birth certificate in Braille. And so that is a very important commitment that we have. As we are working on NIDS now, we are working to identify those persons who are living with disabilities on the card also. And we've worked very closely with the community in terms of how they would want NIDS to be approached. Just a few days ago, I was at the launch of a program using WhatsApp for our young people and it will be a digital life coach for young people where they can use WhatsApp and get information on mentoring, how to do their CV, many different things. And what was really valuable for me were the members of the deaf community who were there. They worked really hard on that program. They said it cannot just be, text, you needed to have voice. And we listened to them and redid the entire program, the entire tool through UNICEF so that the members of the deaf community could see this as a part of their own life journey. And so as we celebrate this week, I again want to say that I am committed to, the administration is committed to persons living with disability, to having them be true parts of our country. Our country can only grow if every single Jamaican realizes their potential. And these individuals have such beautiful potential, and I have a young one at home who says it and shows it every single day, that she's as much as valued as any other child is. And so as we celebrate this week, I know that we have to redouble our efforts in order to ensure that no one in our country is left behind. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. It would really be remiss of me not to recognize the role that Senator Dr. Morris has played in this particular field. And he has gone really above and beyond what would be required of any human being in the normal circumstances. So we recognize you during this week, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris. We recognize you during this week. And trust that you will have that you will get from the Almighty the continued strength and motivation to continue this most important work. And I'm sure that you would agree with me that when you listened to Senator Minister Dixon a while ago, Morris Dixon, you got the impression that perhaps we have a good advocate. So thank you very much all. Minister Hill.
Mr. President, my heart was warmed and touched just to hear that those last two presentations, first from Senator Morris, and then really a very personal and touching one from Senator Morris Dixon. Minister Morris Dixon, what a wonderful place to be and to have an advocate like that. Our entire Senate today, Mr. President, I thought went well. Minister Dixon.
Sorry, and we also recognize, of course, the mother of Senator Gale, which is where we share our family link. For her service to the community for over 40 years, he was saying. So we recognize Senator Gale. Senator Gale, just remind me, Senator Gale, just remind me, I think she's at Tavares. Yeah, oh yes. Okay.
I share that joy as well, Mr. President. And so it is not contemplated to do any further business today, Mr. President. So I ask the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Thank you very much. And Senator Bunting, I believe that the staff would have been, I'm now falling into this thing, the staff would have been planning. That's not really proper English, not for somebody who attended the use of English courses. The staff is planning. The staff is planning a Christmas luncheon, I think, next week, Friday. Is that so, Ms. Curtis? Yes, they're working on it for next week, Friday. So we'd appreciate if we all could have lunch together next week, Friday. And if you just indicate to the staff, those who will be present, we certainly would appreciate it. Sorrel will be served. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.